Hi, so my name is Natalie Wieland and I'm here in Australia, and I'm really excited to be a part of this relearn program, which is really exciting for us to share our stories and relearn really a lot of what we've been doing and think a little bit differently. So this fire starter is a bit of an opportunity to think about some things, and then I'll be here for a Q&A so I can answer any questions you might have. So, a bit of background is here in Australia, I've been an educator for about 20 years. And what does that mean? So, I've been a lecturer and I'm still a lecturer at university in the legal space. So, my background is a lawyer, but I also have an IT background. So, I've been sort of in this ed tech space for a long time. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been working on throughout COVID because I think it's really a time for innovation when it comes to teaching. And I actually think there's some real positives that could come out of this along the lines of accessibility. So people who traditionally mightn't have had access to education, might not have been able to come to class, now can get access to it. So we've opened up a world of opportunity. And I thought I'd just share with you some of the things that I've been working on to talk about, and then in the Q&A, feel free to question me on any of it. But one of my personal passions has always been is to empower educators to create their own content. So I've always been a fan that I don't think it should matter what mode, whether it's face-to-face, online, blended. I think there should be a range of tools that educators can use. And I've always been very alarmed that as soon as something becomes digital or online, a whole new format or process comes in where we often take this information from the subject matter expert or the educator, and then it's taken over to a world where it's possibly storyboarded. Instructional designers might design it, then there might be a creator who develops it, and we end up with something online. And I often think that there's too much disconnection between the original educator and the output. And I've always said I think that educators should be able to build their own content online. Just because it's gone into a digital format shouldn't be a reason that they can't create things. That's not to say that process is not needed. It is in many cases, but sometimes the educator needs to be able to create their own things using tools that are available to them. So I'm going to tell you three different case studies that I've worked on in the last few months. And I hope the reason I spoke about this being for COVID and beyond is I hope that these are the kind of ways we think when we're starting to think about building digital learning in the future. So the first one is I worked with a health organisation here in Australia, in aged care, which has been a very big challenge. I think most of us across the world have been challenged when it comes to aged care and COVID. And one of the things, there's 3,500 staff. Most of the staff are not sitting in front of a computer, so not a corporate staff. They traditionally wouldn't even have access necessarily to a computer, maybe a phone, or all had a phone. English as a second language is a genuine issue, and also digital literacy. So we're talking about a workforce that ranges from cleaners to healthcare workers to chefs. And the challenge that this organisation had is here in Australia, the government was and has been continuing to change the requirements when working in aged care. So when we first started in COVID, all the staff had to wear masks. Then it became masks and shields. Then it became full PPE equipment, just by way of example. So with this particular team I worked with, they needed to keep their staff informed and up to date with and trained really on all of these new procedures that were coming out. And they came to me and they said, we're struggling to keep everyone up to date with these changes. Can you think of a way that we can get to them effectively, but we've got to make this content fast? And what we came up with is a process that every Monday we sat down as a team and said, what changes have come about? And we then made a plan of how we're going to do that. And we planned to deliver it to the staff every Wednesday. And this is how we did one, for example. So we sat down one on a Monday and said, people are not putting on their PPE equipment correctly. So we sat down and said, what are the issues? we've put signs around, but they're job aids, but they're not reading them necessarily. Maybe English as a second language is a problem. The courses available in the LMS, well, a lot of the staff don't access the LMS because they've only got their phones and they're not a traditional workforce. The corporate workforce does that, so the head office was doing that. So we did a quick audit and found out there was 21 key languages spoken in the business. We then found 21 people in the business who spoke each of those languages, and we asked them using their phone to film a demonstration of putting on the PPE equipment correctly whilst commentating in their language. We then uploaded that into the platform that I work with, Vidversity, and we edited them. So they were all built with a phone. And so none of us could get into the nursing homes or the care places. So we had to ask the person to upload that. We then uploaded it all into this central place using the Vidversity phone app. It went into here. We then collated it, put it all together and curated it a bit of editing. And so that was on the Monday we asked them. Tuesday we had the videos, and Wednesday 3,000 staff received an email, or not an email, a text. We decided they received a text which was a URL to how to put on PPE equipment in 21 languages. Now, if you think that was a 3-day turnaround using the technology available to us. So it was quite an empowering experience. And one of the things that we kept an eye on, the open rates, and this was not mandatory training, so we're not tracking if they completed it. We're trying to keep the staff safe and informed. And the staff feedback was unbelievable because they felt cared for, because it was in their language, in a way from their staff. It was an authentic video. It wasn't a generic one that came out from the government that didn't necessarily look like their PPE equipment or their environment. So I thought that was a really great story to share. It was a very empowering way to be an educator. I felt really excited, and we've continued to do that. Every Monday we sit down and say, right, what are the rules that we need to keep everyone informed? And every Wednesday, everybody gets a link, and they're in as many languages or the 21 languages each week. It's been a fast way to produce stuff because we've got 21 creators out there. We only expect them to make videos of 3 or 4 minutes, or we might interview a key person in their organisation, and we bring it all together really fast. And that team of people had never built digital learning before. They were a team of clinical educators. After a few weeks of me helping them out, they're now completely fishing on their own. So I taught them how to fish. Really great story, and wouldn't have happened outside without COVID, but that is a great way to be thinking as educators: fast, agile, authentic, and effective in a way. So going back to when you're going to deliver learning, remember who you're delivering it to. So this organisation had been building traditional SCORM packages in the LMS, which was really well received at head office, but the reality is the 3,000 staff were not accessing it, and it wasn't affecting change. So that's my first story. I thought that was a great one to share with you. The next one is, I worked with another organisation who is a university, and they had the problem of students not being able to necessarily come to class. And so what this particular person did is they ran their Zoom meetings all the classes were on Zoom because the students were stuck all over the world, so they weren't able to get here to Melbourne. And originally they thought they'd just record the Zoom meetings, and that became a problem for a number of reasons. Privacy was a genuine concern. A lot of students didn't want the Zoom sessions recorded, and they found it really stifled discussion. In any kind of workshop, people felt that if it was an interactive environment where they're expecting things of the students really shut down if it was recorded. The second thing is they found that no one wants to watch the whole of a Zoom meeting. So what this particular organisation said is, instead of just sending out Zoom recordings, at the end of every class, the lecturer will go back to or just even in front of Zoom like this, and film a 5-10 minute summary of every class. And then each week they drip feeded that to the students. So the students ended up with this fantastic summary of the semester, sort of like a great place to do your studying. You know how you, at the end of your semester or your subject, to have a summary of every single class is quite phenomenal. So it's easy to make, great for students who might have missed something, had accessibility issues, had Zoom problems, took away that privacy issue, but it was a dynamic way for the lecturer to just give summary of key points each week. And then at the end of the semester, by using the URL, they sent one URL to the students, and then each week they just added another chapter inside. So it would be week 1, week 2, week 3, those summaries. The students absolutely loved that. And what the feedback I got from that is the students said to their lecturers they felt like they could really listen and get engaged in the class, because they knew they didn't have to take copious amounts of notes because that summary was coming. So they could really listen and get involved. The third thing I just want to talk to you about is moving what would be a traditional face-to-face workshop into the online space. So I've worked with many people doing this, and the original sort of reaction at the beginning of the year or March, when this all sort of happened, is people said, I'm going to take this, which is my face-to-face, and I'm going to deliver it exactly the same on Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be. And that sounded like it was going to be okay, but there was a couple of issues. It's exhausting and it's impossible to stay engaged on a half-day, full-day workshop in Zoom. So then people started adding activities. We'll do breakout rooms and Padlet, but still this live synchronous learning was exhausting. So then there was a flip to asynchronous. Go and do a whole lot of stuff on your own. And this has certainly been in homeschooling, in lots of different places, or just completely discrete modules sold online. Maybe if you're a consultant, you said, I'm going to go and build something and sell it in Lessonly, for instance. And then people started coming to us saying, I don't really like this. And blended started rising up. And I'll tell you the way I've done this in a couple of workshops. We have run several workshops now for different organisations and also ourselves around the concept of recording a lot of the material with video, because we're very based on video. So I'll give you an example. We did with one organisation, they run a program on safety for domestic violence care workers. We broke down the content into what we would call static. Static is something that you talk to the room. It's the material that if you were in a workshop, that's the heavy content where the subject matter expert presents that content. We would call that static. We said record all that. Then all the activities do in Zoom. So the day ended up looking like this. Come in the morning, 9 o'clock, welcome to everybody. About half an hour discussion of what the day might look like. And then they were all told you're going off to do 1 or 2 hours of watching this case study, reading this content, doing a whole lot of things. Then back in at 11 o'clock to discuss the case study, do the activities. Off again after an hour or so, do some more asynchronous stuff. Then come back in about 2 o'clock for another activity, a bit more asynchronous, and back at 5 for a final wrap up in Zoom. And then throughout the day, they had somebody in Zoom sitting there as help if you needed it. And what happened is the learners were able to learn at a pace that works for them. They knew with all the static content that they could revisit and see that content again. So again, that feeling of I have to learn it all today. You can always say to yourself, I'm learning some really heavy information about legislation and domestic violence. It's really fascinating, but I know I can go back to it because it's recorded. But then that rich, deep learning where you discuss and percolate and bring out all those ideas were done in Zoom as a discussion. And the feedback from the learners was they absolutely loved this in and out and being able to manage the learning in a way that some people were quicker at the asynchronous stuff. And, you know, adults might fast forward through things. That's not what learning is. Learning to me is not about tracking what people have done. It's keeping them engaged, interested, and they'll go at a pace that works for them. So if you, I always say to whenever I'm teaching somebody, whether it's digital or not, if you know this, you don't have to do it. If they're competent in this space, skip ahead. So that ability in asynchronous learning, so we broke everything down into clear labeled chapters so the learner could say, oh, I already know the introduction, or I already know this case study, I've done it before, and they might have got a cup of tea. To me, that is a great way to teach adults. Let them go in a way that works together, works well for them, but then they kept coming back and into the discussions. And the feedback was astounding. They really loved that blended approach. And of course, now that organisation was a bit top heavy creating it, but now they've run that about, I think they said to me they've run it 19 times now, that workshop, because the asynchronous stuff is already done. And then all they have to do is have a facilitator to facilitate the Zoom interactions. So I hope that's given you some thoughts about how to use, predominantly video is where I'm very much interested in, and not just video. I like video that's edited into small chapters, interactive, has quizzes, competency assessments in there, really more than just dumping a video. But I hope that gives you a sense of some ideas of how digital learning can be really innovative, agile, but also effective.